Welcome, everybody, to the Wholeness Wisdom Well. I am your host, Lizete with this episode with the amazing Gloria Hester. Gloria, welcome, my sweet.
Thank you for having me, Lizette. I'm thrilled to be here and to spend time with you.
Absolutely. This podcast is intended to support soul sisters to step into their sovereignty and their sacred service. And I could not have asked for a dearer sister or a most incredible master who is incredibly humble to join us. And the toughest thing about Gloria is her bio. And we were just talking about that as we got online, is like, how do we describe what you do? And the reason for this, and I've noticed this with many, many gifted spiritually connected, sensitive people, is that they've been guided through this course of life and picked up so many different avenues, constantly learning on how to serve in greater ways, right, Gloria? So Gloria is a yoga therapist. She is a somatic educator. She is an incredible body ecologist that has helped many, including myself, and is also the founder of Yogic Wisdom for horses and humans. So welcome, Gloria. So thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Lizette.
Gloria, if you were to describe, because you've been on this journey your whole life as I have, and we know that ultimately our work is all about bringing wholeness to others and supporting them to step into that. What about this healing arts gripped you and called you with such faithfulness? What is the driving force within you to keep doing this work?
Well, knowing what I know now, I would say there's some sort of contract in place. I was not aware of that when I came here, but I would say it's pretty obvious at this point. There's some sort of contract in place. And I think the reason I'm always continuing to learn is, for one thing, I do love to learn. And for another, I see that there's always some reason for it that becomes really clear very quickly. But I wouldn't say it's the cognitive part of me that's driving that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And when was the first time, how old were you, do you think, when you first had the very first awareness that there was something quite different about you?
Well, I think people around me saw that, but I can't say I'm even now still even, super comfortable talking about that, because I think we're all unique and we're all special. And but I think for me, some of the things I've been told more recently that I don't have memory of, were just people around me were seeing that tendency in me as a very young child, to be more geared toward the healing arts. But I wasn't born into a culture that recognized that at all. So I kind of had to bump along and find my way through that. And still, we're all evolving. And so, I was doing things that I didn't know there were names for those. Like I was teaching yoga nidra when I was 8, but I didn't have a name for it. But I would do that for people who had pain in their bodies.
Right.
So, but I didn't think until a few years ago, I realized, oh, that's actually what was happening. Absolutely, hands down. But I, again, didn't have a name for it. So
what I love about your journey, because then you went into, there's many different things you went into, but I see the red line that I see through the different areas that have evolved, because none of it's contradictory. It's almost complementary and then complementary and then complementary. But what you've actually started to develop is such a wisdom chest, starting with the body as the primary indicator of what's up.
Absolutely.
Whereas I would go to the soul body, or I would go to the emotional body, I would go to the mental body, you would go to the physical body. And that was not only in humans. So what was it about the body that called you and made it that your specialty?
Well, when I first started to study yoga, I definitely started studying yoga as a healing art. And yoga is very much an energy-based system. But if we've not been in our bodies for a long time, and most people haven't, most people leave their bodies when they're pretty young, for various reasons. It's, you know, it's a good coping mechanism, and it's necessary at times. So for me, that, you know, I think that was some sort of universal alignment, some sort of thing that was organized, rather, you know, it was people outside of me saying to me, well, why don't you teach yoga? Because I was studying it quite a bit on my own and fascinated with what I was experiencing through it. And I just want to say for the record that the way I teach, literally someone who is in ICU, I work at that level. So this is not about strength and endurance. You know, if someone's feeling, you know, less than perfect, a lot of times when people hear the word yoga, they think, well, I can't do that because I have an injury or because I'm not well. And those are the times that you absolutely can do yoga. So yoga is meant to meet us where we are. We are not supposed to get somewhere to be able to meet it. So if you find yourself going into studios and getting injuries and things like that, you know, it's an indicator. It isn't, the way you're approaching that practice is not necessarily the right practice for you as an individual. And and that is one reason that I do love the somatic perspective and somatic education, is because it's teaching you to listen on a deep level to your own inner guidance. That way you can do anything in your life and approach that with what I'm teaching. So I may work with someone and we never do any physical practice. It may be that they need some space created somewhere else in their life that's not necessarily happening in the physical. But what led me to that, I mean, I was, even with what I was learning in yoga therapy, I was using that with my dog, who was 17 at the time. And it was about how to help her position her body in a way that she was able to rest. You know, she was up there in years. And so I would find that with very subtle things, it could help her to rest very, very deeply. And so that just led me to discover more and more and more, and to start to recognize different aspects of we experience life through our nervous system. And the thing about our nervous system is our brain can start to kind of become almost like this overlord of our body. Yes. And so then our body is held in, can experience life almost like just one way, right? And it becomes so habituated. And it actually, for some, can become so comfortable, even though they're quite unhappy. They can't, you know, it's just such a formation of, you know, our egoic self to survive and things like that, that it's just too scary to jump past that and go into something else. So it has to be, you know, I work across the species. So I work with horses and dogs and cats, and I've worked with pigs, I've worked with orphaned calves, I've been invited to work with elephants. So, and I'm sure other species I'm not thinking of in this moment, but so we have to, to be able to just find in that moment, like what is appropriate, and for that vertebrate animal, you know, humans, we're vertebrate animals, to find what's appropriate in that moment so that we can work with what is and just be very present to that, so that there's no need to guard and protect, and that, you know, in working from that place.
You are really touching on, I think, the very heart of where I recognized not just the elegance, which it is so elegant. Indeed, like, yes, I'm a powerhouse of transformation, but that's useless. It's only about supporting you with what you need right now, where you're at, and meeting you with this gentleness, right? Which I value so much, and I think it's an incredibly rare commodity, where so much of healing is about, oh, look how phenomenal I am. And very much Gloria is about meeting us where we are, and not overwhelming us with any of it, which is incredible. But what I really love is that you fully believe in how the body is designed in its incredible design, and it is regenerative, and it is whole. However, we are the ones who have picked up on traumas and habits and things that have made us uncomfortable. It's not that the body can't be corrected. You just know where to go exactly.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Which I think is beautiful, because I will do that indeed on the soul level. And this is where our work is so similar. And so oftentimes, because our bodies of education are so different, you would say things. I was like, yeah, but I do. And it's just this lens and it's that
Yeah.
lens. But wholeness is wholeness and oneness is oneness and healing is healing.
Yes. Yeah. It's
That
whether
is so
we,
incredible.
yeah, whether we approach, whether we have a certain thought and that thought is, kind of dictating things, and that
Yes.
creates a response in our bodies, or our bodies are still responding to something that happened 50 years ago that is beyond our conscious awareness. And so I would say that my work is both right brain and left brain, very much.
Yes.
Both.
Yes.
And yeah.
And I love how it translates over species. When you love the animal kingdom, as do I.
I do. Mm-hmm.
And you are, horses right behind you as well. Horses
Yes.
is one of the big reasons we also had you out here and coming to work with Sharon, a very good friend of mine, and yours now as well, of course, with rescue horses. So where did this love relationship with horses begin?
Well, I was born into a horse family. My mom was, trained horses and had grown up with horses, and very much a part of her life. And so that saying, I was raised in a barn, it's very true. And I just wanted to, I didn't want anything to do with anything that didn't involve them, from a very early age. That didn't involve the horses. That was just wired into me so strongly. And I think the thing with animals is that they're so honest, and definitely they have to develop their adaptations as well, and they do develop their adaptations. But at their core, they're just pure energy, pure wildness. And I love that. And that really feeds me. And I know that horses throughout time have done so much for humanity. And I was like, well, how can I give back to them? So when I discovered ways to do that, it felt like very obvious to me. It was a no-brainer. Doors opened so widely for me immediately. And a lot of those I didn't walk through. Like, I would get invited to be featured in something and I didn't do it. And so I think the natural evolutionary process of me as a soul, my soul, and what my soul brought, and came with. So it's been very interesting to be in this field and working this way. So, but I think those are some of the things about animals that just have always pulled me forward. They've been the impetus for me to get in front of a camera. They've been the impetus for me to travel the world. And very much like the time that we spent together in Portugal is it's indelible. I don't know why that word's coming, but it's so indelible, such a powerful time. And so many of, although the time there, there were so many horses on that property, and we worked with each of them in the way that we could within the time that we had. I want to share a story that I think will help to define some things that maybe, because this work I think it can seem kind of nebulous.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So to ground it and bring it into our somas, into our bodies, and into our own understanding. There was a horse that we met there, and I think I have permission to use his name. I know I do, because I'd asked and I'd written a little bit about. So I just want to recall, I don't ever use horses' names that I respect their privacy. So
this is so Gloria. I'm going to respect the horse's privacy. Yes, folks, you heard it here. So we are respecting and loving. And who's this? Is this?
Yes. So this horse, when we met him, we had an opportunity to stand above on a platform, and he got to kind of romp and snort and play. He'd been in a stall, and I was sharing with the group there at the center about some of the things that we were going to be doing and why and how and all these things while we were watching him. And it was based off of what he was doing. So his name is Teddy. And, he had been brought in, and Teddy has a very, a very distinct face, because he'd had an injury that, on his face, it gives him a very distinct face. And so I noticed he would stop and listen for a bit, and then he'd romp some more. And then I remember some of the volunteers, they're like, he's listening, and he indeed was listening. He was very obvious about that. So when it was time for us to work with Teddy with movement, when we all went down and kind of we went to an outside area, and so when I was working with Teddy, I was working with what he'd shown me in his system, and I also very much work by feel. So whether that is via Zoom, in person, or non-local, where we're just meeting in, where we meet, right? So but what I remember, like working with Teddy. So we were looking for bounce back in his muscles, for example. Just do his muscles feel soft and relaxed, or do his muscles feel hard and tight? So we can notice this in ourselves. We can notice this in the horses and other beings. And but one of the things that happened with Teddy, I think we'd been working about 20 minutes, and I remember that everyone who was watching, some people were sitting, some people were standing, and a lady came down the walkway toward Teddy. And I remember that as she came onto, into the area, he dropped his head and he walked forward out of curiosity. Well, the people at the center started crying, and I didn't know why. I didn't understand what they were seeing, but they said, Gloria, this is a horse who, ever since he's been here, he's so terrified of people that when he sees someone he doesn't know, he runs backwards. And he just walked forward to someone out of curiosity, completely safe and calm. And I knew when I met Teddy, that he had his head up really high, and I understood where he was coming from. And I remember thinking that if it takes a certain level of awareness. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't, and no one is perfect at any of this ever. But I just knew that when I met Teddy, I knew that like how we respond to him and how he responds to us, it can dictate the rest of his life in that moment. And so I think there was some space there for that, for that awareness to happen. But when the people at the center saw him drop his head and walk forward out of curiosity, for a horse, that's everything. And they knew it'd been a big shift. And so that is an example of how, I wasn't with Teddy and his, through what brought him to the rescue center. They weren't either, but they knew that this was a horse who was, working with a lot. So I know that from that experience, from him having that, it gets wired in, and then he knows it's like, I'm safe to walk forward through life out of curiosity. And, we have our senses for a reason. If something tells us to create space, it doesn't do away with that. It actually heightens that as well. So, whether it's a person or a horse or a dog or any vertebrate animal, what it does do is it does help the person. This work helps that person or that being discern again what's right for them, what's not right for them, what's safe for them, what's not safe for them, what is the timing and what's not the timing. These are things that we can create more and more neuronal pathways for and get better and better at that. And it is a practice. And
yes,
yeah.
It's all momentum, isn't it? Transformation is momentum. But what I love is that with the right momentum, we can transform anything. And this is very science-based. This is not woo-woo. This is very matter of fact. And yes, it does deal with the subtle energies as well as the true energies, the physical and the energetic. Of course, it all works together. And you just dialed into that. I find it so interesting because just to backtrack and go on the timeline. So after yoga coming into your world, you studied somatics.
Yes, somatic education. So.
And how did you translate that for horses? Was that like immediate? Like, was it immediately with horses?
Well, the universe, there's a lovely person on the planet. Her name's Eleanor Criswell. And some people know her as Eleanor Criswell Hannah. So there's a book that's been authored called Somatics, and it was by a man named Thomas Hannah. And when I was in Alabama teaching yoga, I discovered his book. It really stood out to me. A friend of mine who was a massage therapist had it. It was not even on her radar. Someone had given it to her. She just said, oh, take that. No worries. So I became, pretty obsessed with that. And I was going back to California to study with one of my therapeutic yoga teachers named Sherry Clampett, who is a love. She's just a dear friend and person on the planet as well. It takes a village, by the way, Lizete, and you're part of that village too. So, so when I was really, doing the practice, I was sharing it with my students. And so I was thinking, why don't yoga teachers know about this? So when I went, So when I went to California to be with Sherry again, it was so interesting because when I sat down in the room, and she was co-teaching with a woman I'd never met, but when I sat down, I remember Sherry, they both shared, Joyce Anu is her name. They both shared, they said, well, this week we're going to be focusing on the work of a man named Thomas Hanna.
There you go.
And I
Confirmed.
confirmed. And then Sherry looked at me and she said, they talked a little bit about that, about Tom's work. And she looked at me and she said, and his widow has developed this work for horses. And then I'm just going to do, you're the first person to get full disclosure of the story of how I was brought, because I think it's important. It's time to share it. I don't want to, yeah. So when I went back to Alabama, I was working in a field called integrative yoga therapy. And I wanted to focus some of those hours on somatic education and integrate those with mantra and mudra and what I was up to in the yoga world. And so having grown up with horses and barely even using my legs until I was about 16 years old, I was always sitting on a horse. I was always trying to get my horse in the house. I was always, I was constantly. So I was very interested by that, but it wasn't enough to get me to move on it. Knowing that had happened, it just the time span, it wasn't enough to get me to move on it because I was busy teaching and things like that. So when I put those hours together, and I submitted them and they said, absolutely do it. I was good to go. Well, the first class I taught, a woman from Key West, Florida, was in the room. And after the class, she sat up and she said, I don't know if you know this or not, but there is a paint horse in the corner of this room. And he is very interested in everything that you're doing. And it's very important to him that you know that he's here. I did not know he was there, but when she described him, I knew who it was and who he was. And he was a horse that I had when I was 6 years old. He came to us very injured. My mom nursed him back to health and gave him to me. His name was Scout. I was so young, I didn't know the difference between the words. I named him Scout, but oftentimes, I was 6, I would often call him Scalp, which is really funny if you think about it. His name was Scout, but sometimes, I would mess up the words, right? Sometimes, yeah,
it is interesting.
Yes, it is. And sometimes when people would sneeze, I would say thank you. So I had a thing like with all the language was not my verbal language was not, I don't think was not my first language. It was none of our first languages. Energy is our first language.
Absolutely.
So it made sense to me that of course it would be Scout. Scout and I were two peas in a pod. We rode like the wind, always bareback, just full on everywhere, so. And also knowing his background, he'd gotten wrapped up in a barbed wire fence. And so he was just cut to smithereens. Not at our place. My mom saved him, rescued him. But when she said, there's a paint horse in the corner of this room, he's very interested in everything you're doing. It's very important to him that he's here. And and I was combining Tom's work with mantra and mudra. So I remember looking around the room. I was so worried that all of the women in the room were going to think that this woman was, off of her rocker, so to speak. No one did. Everyone just was like, well, of course, she knows he's here, and how lovely that she knows he's here.
And that's her psychic ability to notice interdimensionally when other beings are present that we might not see.
That's right.
How absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm.
So I went downstairs that night and I called Eleanor, and I did not, as I recall, I did not tell her that a paint horse had been in the corner of the room because at that time I didn't know Eleanor, mm-hmm. But at that time, I didn't know how that would be received. So, and now I know that that's okay, right? It was my experience. It's what led me to make a move. And then I very shortly after that began working with a Tennessee walking horse named Tiny, who played a big role in my life. He really carried me forward and with his strength and his nobility. And so if any of you, as an aside, if any of you are looking for a rescue dog, there's a rescue dog that I want to help place. I named him Noble. So I realized that word came up. So I'm just going to go with it. Depending on when you see this, I'd like for Noble to have a wonderful forever home. So if you feel like you're Noble's person, let us know. So back to the story. So I very quickly started traveling and teaching and sharing and integrating what I was learning and what I knew in the fields of yoga therapy and Somadic education.
Coming
amongst
together.
some other, Yeah, specifically, even with Anya Sar's therapeutics and therapeutic touch and healing touch and alignment, all these different modalities that over the years that I've been very, very involved in. And I feel like it's hard, when you're integrating things in your nervous system, I don't know how to separate those, and I never did. So I would get off of a plane and I would work with a group of humans and horses, and then I would go to study yoga therapy or teach yoga therapy and so forth and so on, and Hannah Somatics and the same thing, as well as Thai yoga massage therapy. So all these different modalities and community that I would bring together, and literally that you help bring together now all over the world too.
Right.
Yeah. And so it very much has been, a labor of love and a labor of devotion. But I don't mean to say, I think anytime we are walking truly our soul's path, our real soul's journey, if people are honest, there's probably going to be times where it feels really, really scary because it is the unknown.
Yes.
And, flying to Kauai and going and rent, just all the different things of not knowing a soul there, and just doing the work I've done and seeing what it's brought together now on the other end, on the other side of that.
Right.
And for me, always knowing I have to be true to myself, and our body never lies. Our body's a really good indicator of that. And that we have to be true to ourselves if we're really going to fulfill our own dharma.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I love how you're not only dealing with the physical, but all the bodies and the wholeness of that and the impact of that. And knowing that root cause is somewhere, there is so many different stories, and I'm so looking forward to hearing so many more and sharing them. But one of the things that you're touching on for me is this paradigm that we've got stuck in many times. I certainly have, and I know a lot of gifted and intuitive and sensitive and very powerful people have gotten stuck in, is that I have to choose one thing and go with it. And we are way past that. It's like you and I both have spent our lifetime now collecting different books of wisdom and integrating those and being led to those. And we've created our own systems. I've created a Rise, you've created Siva, you've created the Yogic Wisdom for horses and humans. So we're bringing forward a new modality, which is a combination of sound, transformational healing, medicine, whatever you want to call it. And it might look like magic, except our universe is magic. Life is magic itself. So it's normal that when it comes back into alignment, it might look like magic. I find it all very magical and mystical, and yet it is so grounded and so evident, So I would love to talk to you about our upcoming collaboration, because this is also one of the main reasons I've chosen. And I was guided. I mean, I got the download of what I was to create, which was a collective for women to be empowered to follow their soul's journey, to follow that calling within themselves and create what I call the ecosystem to hold themselves up so that they can be free to flow in that calling, in that modality, in that magic, in that searching for their unique medicine, or even in the owning of that, because they probably had it their whole lives.
Yeah, I think it's the owning of it.
It's the owning of it and the claiming of that sovereignty and the stepping into that sacred service, as I called it. But one of the reasons, not only because you've mastered your modalities and indeed are the real deal, without a doubt, but I love that you as a woman, and then we can say, okay, but we don't want to be special, and we're not special. The only thing we've done is we've maybe been a few more years on this because it didn't feel like we had a choice. I love how you said it didn't feel like free will, because we didn't have a choice. I don't feel like I really had a choice. I did the corporate career and it burnt me out completely. It's like that. My soul said, not that way.
Right. Yes.
You won't, you can't do this. Yeah. So, and you felt very much the same way.
Absolutely.
I have to do this way.
Yeah.
And what I would love for us to be of is simple soul sisters to all of these women leaders that are coming, that are all healers, masters, mystics, shamans, alchemists, and incredibly savvy businesswomen and incredibly soulful corporate women. And whatever it is we're choosing to do in life, may we have permission, please, completely to own it, to follow it, and get support for this journey, because it ain't easy.
No, and ideally, when you are surrounded by really good people, it is easier in ways. Like you said, it ain't easy, and it is easy when we stay in our alignment and stay in our inner guidance, and again surrounded by really good people, because and yeah, it matters. Like your intuition matters. It all matters. I know when you and I met, we were in a room of probably 300 people or more. It may have been more.
More. It was more. It was about 600. Yeah.
Okay. And I remember, when we talked about who we want to serve, and it was so funny because I kept saying, I said, my ideal client is a bay horse. And because that's what my heart was saying, right? That's my truth. My ideal client is a bay horse. And people, very kind people, would point out to me, Gloria, horses are not online. And so, and so we would laugh about that, but I wouldn't budge. I did not budge. And it's funny because I still remember what I was wearing the day I met you. But anyway, a woman who saw me, she said, we've been looking for you. You're the horsewoman. My roommate has been looking for you. She needs to find you. Her horse needs you. Mm-hmm. So she's like, stay right here. Don't move. Let me go get her. So she runs across this big room. They come running back. They come running across the room like little girls. They are so giddy. And she takes both of my hands. She's like, we found you. We found you. She's jumping up and down. She says, my horse needs you. And I said, what is your horse's name? And she said, Bay. His name is Bay. And I knew in that moment.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right. We have to stand, right? We have to stand.
We have to stand.
So we have to stand. So if you said, okay, Gloria, what's your bio? Well, honestly, like my bio is I stand in the center of my truth. And that's what I help people do. I help them stand in their center.
Exactly.
Whatever that is, in their center, not someone else's center, your center. So, and that, yeah.
And that's so key. And that's why we haven't keyed in yet what modality, because we have such a selection. We'd rather look at who's going to come into this year journey with us and what is it that they need. But the primary thing, and I think that all of the 12 masters that I've collected around this year's journey with me to serve these women leaders that are joining us is indeed around this understanding of, we're not telling you who you need to be. You certainly don't need to be like us, but in the search of your wisdom, these are modalities that have worked for us, and have really supported us. And how can we support you? Because just this validating, like you weren't, as you said, you weren't surrounded by people that would validate that the sensitivity of yours was actually a gift. It wasn't a weakness. It wasn't an inferiority. It was a sensitivity to sense subtle energies that you were probably transmuting, not even knowing you were doing that, and so many of us. So what I see us as is just forerunners, and I can own that now. I can truly own, and I've been devoted to my journey of wholeness since I was a toddler, as you. Yes. Always knowing it needs to be different. It needs to be kinder. We're all love. What are we doing? What are we doing? And how can we help? And many of us are stepping up now. Very excited.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I am as well.
Gloria, why did you want to be in this journey with me?
Well, for one thing, it was just an obvious thing that I love you so much, as well as that you're very persuasive and you're very powerful. And what I mean by that, you're able to ground some energy. I know you are absolutely able to ground some energy. I know that, or I wouldn't have shared the story about Scout. And that is a very pivotal piece to this work, because the horses are calling for this. I've had people call on me for 3 years to try to get me to come be with their horse. It took them 3 years to get me there, but they did it. They too are very persuasive. But it's very, for me, we all have to know what motivates us, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the things. And the only reason you needed to be persuasive for me was because I feel so called to the animal work. However, all those 600 people in that room were right. Horses are not online. Their humans are, right?
But their humans are, their owners
Yeah,
are.
their humans are, and their owners are. And the people, many of my clients are humans that don't have horses, and I love them and I adore working with them. And it's a privilege to work with them and serve them through their nervous system. And I think so when you said, why did I say yes to that? It's all of that and more. I trust you. I know you're a leader. I know who you are as a person. We've spent enormous amounts of deep time together, and you know, and I know who you are in your heart and why you're here and who you serve, and we both have a lot of that in common. But it looks different. It looks different.
Exactly.
It shows up different. It shows it different.
And we're coming from two different lenses, which I think is why this is so powerful, to have this circle of different people with different medicine, different lenses, different modalities, because they're going to come at it at a different way, and each one of them striving for wholeness in their own personal integrity and in their service to others. And the horses are definitely part of our journey, because I was not a horse person. Like, we're not a horse person. I would look at a horse and it's beautiful, but I wasn't a horse person until I actually went and did my work, which was grounding myself in wholeness and working with Sharon, who I was there on retreat with, and grounding her in wholeness. And as we were working on our healing, I went out in that state intact. And then I met with a horse. And for the very first time, I actually recognized the beings that they are. And I swear, I have never in my life felt an angelic, right? Angelic presence as I did in the presence of those horses. And what they did was just purely mirror where I was coming from. And I had always come to them with fear of their bigness, because I knew they could crush me if they wanted to. And now, as I came with no fear and in this divine energy, I could sense their divine energy. And literally, the breakthrough that I received from one of the horses that just walked up to me, showing me his masculine strength and showing me, and literally what I heard from him energetically, but the words were, this power of the masculine is never meant to hurt you, loved one. And it was such a healing moment. And he just took me literally in his arms, if he had arms, because he put his nose on my back and pulled me in. We just stood there chest to chest for 20 minutes. We heard it. I cried. He heard it. And I said, oh my goodness, I need to bring people, to experience wholeness, and then experience these horses. And my love, there's something in the works for you and me to do together, because that would be powerful. These horses are healers too.
And they need healing as well.
It's just so beautiful. Well, I'm so excited for our journey, and I'm so excited for this podcast and all that it will touch and speak to. There is a universe of wisdom here that we can't even get into. So that's why we're building a container for a year. And we know the right people will come.
Yeah, I would say, so fear in the ego blocks out the wisdom that's the universal wisdom. And that's a coping mechanism. It's a coping mechanism.
It absolutely is, but it's within them. It's within all of us.
It absolutely is. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Gloria, thank you so much, my love, for this time.
Thank you.
For this conversation, for your friendship and your love. And everybody else, if you'd love to hear more about Gloria, all the links are below. If you want to know more about our program together, that's also below. I want to thank you so much for being here, being on your sacred journey for your sovereignty and your sacred service. I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.